Okay, we are going to go a little bit over our body composition slides. So we're going to talk about optimal body weight for performance, fitness, and well-being. Okay, so we're going to figure out what part of the bodies constitute fat mass and fat-free mass, as well as look at how lots of techniques are used to assess body composition. Okay, as well as examine the relative leanness and fatness to performance in sport, because sport's kind of one of the fun things that we get to talk about in here. Okay, so uh, there are several different methods for measuring body composition. The two compartment model is the most common. It's the simplest and easy form of measuring body composition. The downside is it can only measure fat mass and fat-free mass. So the model that we use the most is this model over here on the right-hand side. Again, it divides your body up into fat mass and fat-free mass, right? So you basically have the fat mass and everything else. Now, we've got fat in all over our body. We've got it surrounding our organs. We've got it in our organs. We've got it surrounding some of the nerves. Remember the myelin sheath that covers some of your nerves? So you've got them around your nerves and in your brain. You've got phospholipids in your cells that count towards your fat mass. And the problem is that most of our methods that we use cannot differentiate between this fat mass, between what is necessary and what is not. So this is the model that we use the most, right? There's also another two-compartment model that attempts to break it down into fat, storage fat, and essential fat. So storage fat is just exactly what it sounds like, the storage fat. The essential fat is the things like the myelin sheath and the lipids that are in our cells and all those sorts of things. The problem is that we can't really differentiate the two very well. Okay. There are other models such as the anatomical model, which divides your body composition up into fat, muscle, organs, bone, and other stuff, as well as a chemical model that can break it down into your chemical components. The problem with these right here is they are very difficult to do while you are still alive. So obviously, we're going to use mostly the two-compartment model, which divides it up into fat mass and fat-free mass. So when we talk about fat mass and lean mass, fat-free mass is all the body's non-fat tissue, including bone, muscle, organs, and connective tissue. When we talk about lean body mass, we'll include all fat-free mass along with the essential fat. So lean body mass, again, it's very difficult to measure. So that's why we use the fat mass and fat-free mass. So that's just a further explanation of what I've already given you. Okay, so we do have body fat all throughout our body. And remember, we can't tell... it's very difficult to measure that and tell the difference between that and our storage fat. Okay, so remember that body composition is a better indicator of fitness than body size and weight, and that being over fat and not necessarily overweight has negative impacts on athletic performance and health. Standard height and weight tables, they're useful and they can give estimates, but they're not very good with athletes and they're not very good on an individual level, primarily because you can have you could have a guy that's 6'2" and 220 pounds and very strong and very muscular. You could also have somebody that's 220 pounds, that's 6'2" and is over fat. And the height and weight tables are going to give you the same measurement for this person, this individual. One of them could be very fit and the other one could be overweight. So that's why the height and weight tables are not perfect. Okay, so body composition. Okay, so this slide's actually out of place. I need to move it, but that's okay for now. So when we talk about obesity and carrying extra body fat, there are two different kinds, right? We've got android obesity, which is apple-shaped, and gynoid obesity, which is pear-shaped. So android obesity is more commonly associated with the negative risk factors that we think about when we talk about body fatness. So and we talk about being overweight. So this one on the left, the android obesity, think of android apple, right? That's the way that men are more likely to carry their body fat. The gynoid obesity, carrying the weight down lower, that's more often the way that women carry their body fat. And unfortunately for us guys, this apple shape is again more negatively associated with the negative health outcomes, heart disease, stroke, these sorts of things. So you really don't want to be overweight in either case, but the apple shape, the android obesity, is actually worse for you. You don't have a lot of control of that because you can't really control where you carry your fat. You can't spot reduce it. It's just mostly genetic. Okay, right? So that's just what we just talked about, android versus gynoid obesity, right? Okay, so our simple methods of assessing body type and build there are two that we're going to talk about. One is the waist to hip circumference. The other one is the body mass index. So waist to hip circumference is just you measure the waist and you measure the hips. You divide the waist by the hips. It's very simple. All it requires is a cloth measuring tape. Okay, so it gives you a pretty good idea of how somebody is built, right? So for females, above 0.80 is at high risk for obesity-related diseases. For men, above 0.91 is a high risk for obesity-related diseases, right? So the closer the waist and hip circumference, the worse it is, the more likely you are to suffer from obesity-related diseases, right? With body mass index, it's simply your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. So this is essentially just like a height and weight chart. And over 25 is considered obese, or over 25 is considered overweight, while over 30 is considered obese and associated with negative health outcomes. So the problem is that these measurements are not methods of measuring body composition. It's an attempt to measure body type, but you're not measuring actual body composition. Okay, they don't measure actual fatness. Again, think of my example before of somebody who's 6'2" and 220 pounds. This could be a very muscular individual, or it could be a fat individual, an over-fat individual. So that's where they kind of lose their usefulness. So the primary advantage of these methods is that they're non-invasive. Okay, they required nothing but a scale and or a measuring device to measure height, as well as circumference of the waist and the hips. So they're very easy. They work really well when measuring a large population, but they don't work well for individuals. So let's say we have an example. Let's say we have 1,000 community college students that we want to measure. Okay, and we really don't have time to do more invasive techniques on these people, so we just do body mass index, or we do waist to hip ratio, because it's very, very easy. And if our statistics tell us that 1/3 of these people are overweight by their BMI, and that over 1/3 of them have a BMI greater than 25, then that's probably a pretty good and accurate representation of the group. Okay. The downside is that it is not a good it may not be a good representation of each individual person. So very good at measuring groups, large populations, not necessarily work well for individuals. Okay. So our next step is to learn to assess body composition. So this is actually the fat mass and the fat-free mass. We're going to go over 3 different methods: densitometry or hydrostatic weighing, skin fold fat thickness, and bioelectric impedance, mostly because these are the ones that you are most likely to come across. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and we'll start that over with a new video.